Assalamu alaikum, everyone. How's everyone doing? I hope you are doing great, inshallah, in great health. And I once again apologize for the delay in getting on here. The internet in Turkey can be iffy. For some reason, it's like perfectly fine the entire week, and then I get confidence that I can go live. But then when time comes to go live, I get these issues. I hope it hasn't inconvenienced too much. So today, there's been so much that has been going on in the markets, and I kind of wanted to give you my thoughts on it. A lot of assets that I talk about frequently have been making headlines. So we're going to talk about Tesla, Bitcoin, and Dogecoin, inshallah. Three assets that I think there's a probable bullish thesis to make. But before we jump in, I'm going to relate to you a story from my experience here in Turkey. So I was at a hotel, and they were having a magic show there, right? And you look at the people there, and they don't really seem like you wouldn't know they're Muslim if you didn't know that you were, in Turkey, and Turkish population is Muslim. So they certainly didn't display outward appearance of their religion. But in the midst of the magic show, the adhan comes on, and they stop the magic show. Everything stops. There was music, they stopped the music, they stopped the show, and they waited until the adhan finished in order to finish their show. So the lesson from this is perhaps an obvious one, but something that I think is worth remembering and reminding oneself of, which is that, don't judge people by their outward appearance. You don't really know what's in their heart. And also, like, if you see a brother of yours or a sister of yours doing something that is objectionable to you on some level, then don't cancel that person. Rather, try to discourage what you consider to be bad and encourage what you think is good. And you don't know, perhaps they are better than you in more ways than one. So that's sort of a story from my experience in Turkey that I wanted to relay. Many people ask me about my experience in Turkey and how it has been going. And I want to say, like, it's not perfect. So, I don't want to give the impression of either extreme. I don't want to say, oh, well, it's perfect, it's heaven over here, nor do I want to say like how a lot of people are sort of conveying it to be, which is that it's sort of a cesspool of racism and complete distance from Islam. And neither extreme is true. There are good people here and bad people, just like there is in any other country. But I think the good far exceed in number the bad. And I think it's important for us as Muslims to kind of cut each other slack. Like, if you have a bad experience, don't generalize on the entire population. And certainly don't advertise your bad experience and sort of stereotype a population because of your bad experience, which becomes self-reinforcing, and people start to expect it from these people, and then they start to display that behavior. So I just wanted to relay that thought. All right, back to finance, inshallah, and the markets and investing. So as it relates to the macroeconomy, recent data suggests that, well, I would say kind of leaves us on the fence, as was Jerome Powell in his latest remarks. He basically he wanted to maintain maximum optionality for himself in his comments at Jackson Hole, and basically saying, I don't know, maybe we raise rates, maybe we don't raise rates. For those who are unfamiliar, interest rates, as it relates to asset prices, is sort of like gravity. It pulls everything down. The stronger it is, or the higher the interest rates are, the further down asset prices get pulled, because money is sucked out of other assets and into fixed income products that pay interest. So people or investors, especially investors in the stock market, are trying to figure out, is there going to be another rate hike, and therefore are stocks going to go down further, or have we kind of plateaued here and we're just going to wait for the previous rate hikes to take effect and inflation to fall? And to be honest, the answer is no one really knows, and the Fed chairman doesn't really know. They're basically going to see how the economy is doing and act accordingly. Unfortunately, in capitalistic societies, they kind of have accepted this equation wherein you can't really have steady low inflation and low unemployment at the same time, and that each one of these is going to go through a cycle, and when it does, the other is going to be in a different part of its cycle. So when inflation is high, unemployment is low, and to bring inflation down, unemployment has to go up. I don't subscribe to that at all. As someone who subscribes to Islamic economics, which I think need more clarity in the minds of many, but Islamic economy that doesn't have interest bearing, that doesn't need to make this trade-off continuously between full employment and inflation. And in fact, if you fix the money, I think you fix a lot of the inflation problem. Which brings me to the first asset that I want to talk about today, and that is Bitcoin. So for that, let me share this chart, which I think is useful. So this chart is called the stock to flow chart, and it basically shows, the Bitcoin relative strength index, rather. And this basically shows whether a Bitcoin is overbought or oversold at any period of time. And I think we can clearly see that we're in, as it relates to the cyclical patterns that we've seen in Bitcoin, we're closer to the bottom of the cycle. And so I think what we're waiting on right now is an improvement in monetary conditions. So if interest rates are to go down, then that would certainly be positive for Bitcoin, as it would be for every other asset, for the reasons I explained earlier. But also we're waiting for a catalyst to get us into sort of a more healthy strength, or as it relates to historically in terms of buyers versus sellers for Bitcoin. So this catalyst has become rather obvious in terms of like something that could be expected. And I think that this is perhaps the biggest catalyst that Bitcoin has ever seen, ever since it started. I understand the cyclical catalyst for Bitcoin, which is the continuing increasing of the money supply or rather not the cyclical, but the secular catalyst, which is that the money supply is continuously increasing, people's purchasing power is decreasing, and therefore they're always looking for an asset that can maintain its purchasing power over time. And Bitcoin solves this by having a cap on how many Bitcoins can be released in every cycle of a Bitcoin, how many Bitcoins can be released in every unit of time. And then the total number of Bitcoin is capped at 21 million. So these aspects of Bitcoin help sort of remedy the inflation problem that our traditional currencies face. So that's a sort of secular trend. It's always ongoing. Now, you also have the halving, which is when the number of Bitcoins that enter into circulation, the number of new Bitcoins that are minted, if you will, falls in half for every unit of time. So in every month, instead of introducing X number of Bitcoins, it falls to X divided by 2. And this happens every 4 years for Bitcoin. And it's scheduled to happen around April of next year. So you have the halving coming up. So supply for Bitcoin is going to drop to half of what it is today. This we know. However, the big catalyst, I think, for Bitcoin that is perhaps, the biggest that this asset has ever seen is with the approval of a spot Bitcoin ETF in the United States. And it does seem that we're one step closer to this approval because a previous company that had applied to open or to start a spot Bitcoin ETF in the United States and had their application rejected by the Securities and Exchange Commission, took the SEC to court and said, hey, this decision not to allow us to open a spot Bitcoin ETF is an unfair one. We want you to review it. Judges review this decision by the SEC, and the judges reviewed the decision, and they sided with the company that sued the SEC, and that company is Grayscale. So, and it was a unanimous decision, and it was extremely strongly worded, the decisions of the judges was. And so it does appear that we are on track to have the SEC, unless it appeals the decision of the court, which is unlikely considering the strong language that the judges came out and the unanimity of their opinion regarding this case. So they weren't on the fence about it, if you read the language of the opinion. So, I mean, it can appeal, but that appeal will only delay the ETF. It won't actually, I don't think, if it appeals, it won't do it any good. Simply, it will extend the time it takes for a Bitcoin ETF to be approved. But if it doesn't appeal, then basically by the start of next year, January of next year, the SEC basically has to approve a Bitcoin ETF unless it finds some other way to delay it and reject the applications of now many companies, including BlackRock and ARK, to open their own spot Bitcoin ETFs. So if a US-based spot Bitcoin ETF is approved, there's going to be a flood of money going into Bitcoin from institutional investors that can now access Bitcoin without going the route of, actually having to deal with the coins themselves or the tokens themselves, or, having to, buy them on some sort of crypto exchange. They don't have to deal with any of that. They can access it through their brokerage account, and so many different retirement accounts will add access to Bitcoin ETFs. So you're really going to see the big bucks flowing into this asset. And it's going to come at a time when the supply the minting of this asset falls in half, as we said. And so I really think that 2024 is going to be an extremely good year for Bitcoin. Historically, what has happened is that in the run-up to the halving, there's been a run-up in price of Bitcoin, but then after the halving, there's a drop in the price of Bitcoin, but then it runs up after that for the next 12 months pretty substantially. So whether, the approval of a Bitcoin ETF, the timing of that approval, when that comes, is really, it may throw that pattern off, depending on when that approval comes. But I think you can expect, at least to some degree, given the supply and demand dynamics as I foresee them to be for this asset, I think you can suspect a run up in price. I think if a Bitcoin ETF is approved, it's not unreasonable to expect a price north of 100,000 in the next 12 to 24 months. In the next 12 to 24 months for Bitcoin, a price north of 100,000. I think that this is reasonable, if not, dare I say, probable, in the event of an approval of a Bitcoin spot ETF, which, as I mentioned, seems more probable now after the court's decision. So that's as it relates to Bitcoin. Now, exposure to Bitcoin in our PIF portfolios has come through GBTC, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which is the company that I mentioned that actually sued the SEC and won. So we have shares in that. And by the way, the shares of Grayscale are now trading at a discount to the actual Bitcoin that they hold, and that's an entirely separate topic. So in the event a Bitcoin ETF is approved, the discount that they're trading at should disappear. And so right now the discount is anywhere between 20 and 30%. So that should give it a nice, 20 to 30% pop if a Bitcoin ETF is approved, and the prices pop in the prices of Grayscale, in addition to the run up in the Bitcoin price, which I foresee. And then the second way we get exposure to Bitcoin is through Bitcoin miners. And it's important here, in order to keep things halal, to make sure that if you are invested in a Bitcoin miner, that you're invested in a Bitcoin miner that doesn't have a lot of leverage. A lot of Bitcoin miners have a lot of leverage. That's how they've been, financing their mining equipment and mining activities. A lot of them are, unprofitable, and therefore they continue to take on more debt and continue to dilute their shareholders. So it's kind of tricky when it comes to Bitcoin miners. Make sure you look at the capital structure of the companies with regards to Bitcoin miners, and obviously for halal and haram reasons, avoid the ones that have too much interest-bearing debt, but also for financial reasons, these companies may not make it. A lot of them may not make it. If the period of their unprofitability extends too long, they may go bankrupt with too much debt. So that's something to keep in mind. The next big thing is Tesla recently dropped its prices on Model S and X by around 20%. Why is this a big issue? Well, in the United States, at least for Model X, the drop in price will actually make it qualify for the $7,500 tax credit, federal tax credit, which will, I think, incentivize more people to buy it by the end of the year. But also it's important because we can see Tesla really getting aggressive with regards to choking out its competition. Tesla is sitting on north of $20 billion in cash, and it's the only EV maker that's profitable, basically, profitable from selling EVs in the United States, at least. And therefore, the other companies that are trying to transition from internal combustion engine cars to EVs, are really finding it hard to compete with Tesla now that its prices are going down. It's still cash flow positive. It's still producing, it's still generating a lot of cash. And yet the other car companies are burning a lot of cash in order to set up still the facilities to produce even a fraction of what Tesla is producing in terms of electric vehicles. And so I like the aggression that Tesla is showing here in terms of making sure that its top line growth, its revenue growth is always growing at a very aggressive pace, regardless of market conditions. And it's able to do that because of the economics of its business. And so I think if you believe in EVs, you believe in autonomy, you believe that these are the future, Tesla is a no-brainer in terms of an investment to make. Not investment advice, of course, but seems like a granny shot at this point. It's a layup. And I think that whatever the market does, whatever the economy does, if the economy slows down, this will actually improve Tesla's competitive position because it is much healthier from a financial perspective than its competition. And it's going to, from its actions, we can see that it's keen on using its balance sheet strategically to increase its market share and really not give any breathing room to competition. I should also mention that with regards to Tesla, something extremely noteworthy has happened, which is that I think around 10 days ago, Elon Musk had a drive with the full self-driving version 12, wherein the claim that was made was that the version 12 of full self-driving is actually quite different from anything that either Tesla has done or any of its competitors have done, in that the car was actually learning and making decisions based on video. It wasn't making those decisions based on coded instructions. And so from end to end, it was artificial intelligence that was responsible for the full self-driving capabilities of Tesla. And this is a qualitative step above anyone else. I don't know how long it's going to take to reach full autonomy, but it does seem to me that, if you give the analogy of, how do people actually learn to drive? Well, it's through visually observing, your surroundings and how other people drive. So it does seem to me that that's, the logical way if you want the car to drive itself to actually build that capability through vision, that is. And so it seems like Tesla has finally reached a solution. Yes, it still needs tinkering and perfection, but it reached the approach rather that can get us to the solution, which is the learning through vision. If this is true, this is a real watershed moment for Tesla, the company, but for full self-driving. And then when you think about the capabilities that Tesla is developing as it relates to artificial intelligence, through solving the full self-driving problem, which is an extremely difficult one, you start to ask yourself, well, what happens if it applies some of these learnings to the robots that it's creating? And it applies some of that intelligence to some of its other products. solar panels, energy storage. What can it do with that? And it seems the possibilities are quite immense, certainly attractive from an investor standpoint. So that's as it relates to Tesla. Now, I don't know what Tesla is going to do in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months. But I think if you have a investment horizon of 12, 24, 36 months, which you should if you're investing in the market, then it seems that there's a lot of potential catalysts here, including something like a limited rollout of a robo-taxi service wherein Tesla vehicles actually act as autonomous Ubers. That would see the value of Tesla cars really increase because they're no longer a income, or they're no longer a pure cost, but they're a income generating asset. So it's very likely that their price will differ substantially. And for the first time, perhaps cars will go from a depreciating asset to one that increases in price over time. And the third asset that I want to talk about was Dogecoin. And the reason I want to talk about it is because X, the social media company that Elon Musk acquired, previously Twitter, recently got approval for crypto payments. And Elon has mentioned previously that they were pretty keen on enabling payments, making X a payment platform in addition to its social media functionality. And it was mentioned that Dogecoin may have a unique role to play as it relates to crypto payments, even though the platform is going to focus on traditional money, so enabling it for fiat currencies. But the crypto payment option will be there, and that's, I think, we know that to be the case for sure. We're not really sure how Dogecoin will play into that, but we know that there will be crypto payments there. And I just wanted to show you a couple of stats. So if you look at the number of global crypto owners, it's and this is as of August 11, 2023, it's close to 420 million. Number of global Bitcoin owners, it's 219 million. Now, if you look at the number of users of X, the social media platform, it's between 531 million to 541 million. So twice as many users are on X than own Bitcoin. All this to say that if we reach a point where X in some way has given some advantage or some incentive to use Dogecoin, or made it easy to use Dogecoin, and perhaps gave it some amount of preference, you're talking about 540 million users suddenly being exposed to this cryptocurrency, which is twice as many users as own Bitcoin. Now, this is not to say that all 540 million users are going to use Dogecoin, but at least they all of a sudden have access to it and can use it if they decide to. Can use it to make payments on the platform, can use it to send money to other people in their network on that platform. And when you consider that the current market cap of Dogecoin is around $8 billion compared to the current market cap of Bitcoin at around $500 billion, you can easily see the bull thesis here in terms of the potential appreciation that Dogecoin could experience. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to, reach the market cap of Bitcoin anytime soon, but could it double from where it is right now? Could it triple? that seems to me like not an outlandish possibility, considering the facts that I've mentioned. So this is obviously a long shot. It's not something that you should, put any money that you can't lose into. You certainly need to be careful with any crypto investing. But to me, at least, it's worthy of a bit of exposure, and that's what I have in my portfolio. So that's my updates for Tesla, Bitcoin, and Dogecoin. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask that now. Otherwise, I hope you guys found this useful. Maybe we'll take one question. Bitcoin trading in futures halal in Islam. I did a video actually on crypto futures, and I would say stay away from crypto futures. Essentially, what you're dealing with is a debt that you're trading. So I would stay away from futures. And generally speaking, I would say stay away from derivatives. For the individual investor, they typically don't have much reason to be using derivatives other than to try to enhance their returns, which is not inherently, a bad thing. But when you consider how iffy they can be from a halal perspective, I think it's probably best to just stay away. All right, guys, I hope you found this useful, inshallah. And until next time, take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all.